Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Petitions and Representations Board. Members and officers, please remember to switch microphones on and speak directly into the microphone and switch off again after speaking. The meeting this evening is live streamed to the public, and a recording of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Switch off mobile phones or put them on silent mode. If you need to use your mobile during the meeting, please leave the chamber and return when finished. So let's get started on the agenda. Apologies for absence.
None, Chair.
Thank you. The minutes of the last meeting, are they all read and agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed? Thank you. Do we have any section 106?
None, Chair.
Any disclosures of interest? Councillor Steer?
Yeah, sorry, just for the record, the petitioners have contacted my employer over this issue, and I think it's with the same letter as the one on the agenda addressed to Councillor Franks, but I don't think that's interest, it's just a declaration for the public record.
Thank you. Do we have any urgent business?
Again, none, Chair.
Right, so we'll move on to item number 6, which is Bushmead Primary School closure of entrance on Old Bedford Road. I'll hand over to the officer.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. I have submitted a report for members. You'll see on there the background to the issues and a bit of information in terms of what's going on, the reason for the closure. Just to add to that, we've had a bit of an update today after a phone call with the school. It seems that works are due to start on Monday for the repair of the closed path, and they are due to complete in 4 weeks' time. So we're expecting reopening of that path in 4 weeks' time. Just to add to the report, since the return of schools after Christmas, officers have attended on 6 occasions to carry out enforcement activities. We have further enforcement scheduled in for the coming weeks. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions? No? Oh.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the visits and actions, how many tickets or whatever, or warnings have been issued in that time?
So, bear with me. So we've issued 9 PCNs since we've been visiting. But just to put this in context, an officer issuing a ticket is less likely to do so if the drivers see them present. So that's not saying there's been 9 vehicles causing offences. It's more likely those vehicles have been moved on. And in fact, the statistics I've been given includes 13 vehicles moved on that were recorded. Others have obviously seen the officers before they've been able to record them and moved on promptly. So yeah.
So it's working in terms of moving them on, but they're still turning up in the first place. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Marshall?
In your experience, is this something which is peculiar to this area of town, Bushmead School, or is it something that's prevalent across the whole borough?
This is borough-wide, without a doubt. We've got multiple hotspot locations, we call them, where particular schools have issues. We do have deployable cameras specifically for this reason, and we tend to rotate them around schools on a fairly regular basis. It's just unfortunately the case.
Sorry, could you speak closer to the mic so the petitioners can hear you? Thank you.
As I was saying, we have deployable cameras, and they are sent to hotspot locations where we know there are issues going on. But given the numbers of schools, it's not possible to have those cameras at all schools at all times. Bushmead is scheduled to have a deployable camera, am I right in saying 23rd of this month?
We're working on a new camera being installed. Tony Stefano. We are working on deploying one of our existing cameras back to Bushmead Road, and I'm just waiting for a date as to when that movement can take place, because it will be removed from another school site, which is where it's at, back to Bushmead. So I'm hoping that will be done within the next few weeks. I'm just waiting for confirmation from the contractor. Can I also point out, just for clarity, that the cameras themselves are limited in their ability and what they can do. So under the current regulations, whilst we would all like them to be able to do more than just, you know, the school entrance markings, the yellow zigzags directly outside the gate, unfortunately, they're not able to be used to monitor things like yellow lines or vehicles doing U-turns or reversing onto drives, because the regulations simply don't allow them to be used for that purpose. So the only purpose that the camera will be there for is to continue to monitor the actual yellow zigzags outside the front of the school. And that is the only powers that we've got to use cameras for in terms of enforcement on conventional restrictions like school zigzags, for example.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Yes, go ahead.
So we currently have 5 deployable cameras. That is in addition to our CCTV enforcement vehicle. That's all we have. They're not cheap. They come at quite a cost, which is why we only have 5, and which is why we periodically move them around between schools for that reason. So no, hopefully that answers your question.
Any other questions from members? I will hand over to the lead petitioner to speak. Just to let you know, you're going to have a 5-minute limit. Thank you.
Right, thank you all for taking our petition. The situation at Bushmead Road has been getting worse ever since the school's increased in size, and comments were made at the time of planning for the school expansion that the traffic was going to get worse. There were all sorts of plans promised to be put in place which didn't happen. What happened in the end was the restrictions that were implied on the residents of Bushmead Road for 24/7, 365 a year. So even when the school is closed, we still have restrictions placed upon us. Now, in the last 4 years, it's been getting steadily worse. Now, on your report that you gave on item 17, you said that you contacted the highways and there's been nothing outside for the last 10 years. You've had an email this morning from one of the residents. Their son was nearly knocked down in 2020. And we constantly face abuse if we ask people to let us on or off our drives. Don't park outside, you get abuse and everything else. Up to recently, I've been ringing the school on a regular basis and just get told it's not our problem, call the council, call the police. Now, we all know we live near a school, we all know that there is a penalty to be paid for that. We've all adjusted our lives to work around the school times. But unfortunately, it's getting worse. The school boundaries were increased in size, so people do tend to drive. There is actually one person that we're aware of who lives halfway down Old Bedford Road and still drives their kids to school. So you're talking less than a quarter of a mile. Now, I appreciate what you've done with getting the officers there more often than they have been. I think I've seen more traffic officers there than I have in the last 20 years. Now, I'm surprised you've only issued 9 tickets, because I could give you photographs as late as the middle of last week, where on the opposite side of the road was completely full, one end to the other, with cars parked, A, on the pavement, which you're not allowed to do, and B, on the yellow line, which they're not allowed to do. So my question is, why weren't any of those people ticketed?
Just to clarify, are you finished with everything that you were going to say?
No, I'll get an answer
Do
to
you
the
mind
question.
if you finish everything, and then if the officer wants to respond, they can come back to you at the end?
Next
Thank
question then is, the mobile car you've got, is that empowered to drive down and take photographs of cars and registrations to book people without actually doing it there and then? And I appreciate the lollipop gentleman, who I think is the bravest man I know, because he regularly gets people driving at him. What brought it to a head was the closing of the school gate. Understand the reasons why, for safety. Every time we asked what was going on, we were told no money. That's now been found, and we appreciate that it's going to be opened again. But it doesn't solve the immediate problem. We get parents doing 3-point turns, driving over the pavement onto our drives, and when people are coming, there are YouTube videos that were put out by the people who live on there of 3 or 4 cars driving fully 4 wheels on the pavement between a parked car that's half on, half off the pavement and the road. And the other day, I sat and watched the bus just sit there for 20 minutes because there was no way he could go. And buses aren't allowed to reverse with passengers on, so he just sat there. So the whole road ground to a halt. Now, when your officers are there, people don't park on the other side of the road and the traffic flows. So I raised this issue with the planning back in 2013. The secret is enforcement. Now, I appreciate you've got limited resources, but surely the number of tickets you could have issued in the last 2 months, you could self-fund yourself. So I don't know why you don't, but there are obviously reasons why. But the expansion of the school was nothing to do with the residents. We know there's a penalty to pay by living near the school, but it wasn't our choice or our option to have the school increase so that the traffic would increase. Final question for the councillors, maybe to go back to the school. What have they done with the plans that are in the planning permission, which the council breached, by the way, because you didn't discharge any of the conditions before the school was built and opened, which you should have done. But you can't, like the post office, you can't prosecute yourselves. What has the school done in walk-to-work schemes and stuff that were all promised at the time that the school was expanded? Now, the situation is probably going to get better because I understand the school is reducing the number of intake classes from next year. I think it's 3 less they're getting, so the number of parents should get less. But it's a miracle. I've lived there since 1990, so I've seen it go from beginning to end. It's a miracle no one has been seriously injured or a child killed. I personally saw a kid 2 days ago, was walking down the road with his mum, he dropped something, he bent down to pick it up so he was out of car mirror sight, and someone did a 3-point turn. His mum had to pull him out of the way, otherwise he'd have been run over. And if God forbid it happens, you've got a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let the officer to respond to that, but I think some of that is possibly within different departments, some of those answers.
A few things to comment on. Firstly, on the planning comments, I can't comment on the planning issue. I'm not a planning person. I'm coming at this purely from a parking enforcement aspect, unfortunately, so I apologise I can't give you the answers that you to do that. In relation to the use of the mobile vehicle, it operates in exactly the same way as the fixed site deployable cameras that I referred to earlier. So in other words, the only restriction that the camera can enforce and monitor is the yellow school entrance markings. It can't drive up and down Bushmead Road or any other road for that matter, taking random photographs of vehicles parking so that we can subsequently issue tickets. It doesn't work that way. We don't have the powers to operate in that way. All we can do is use those cameras, whether it be a car or a fixed site camera on a column, to monitor specific parking restrictions, and the only one that it can monitor in this case is the yellow entrance markings outside the school, which is what it would do. And the reason we're putting the camera back in Bushmead Road is that it will then be a permanent presence to monitor those school entrance markings. You made a comment about why none of them were issued with a PCN. Again, I don't know if there was any of our parking enforcement officers on site on that date that you referred to, but clearly the expectation is when the officers are on site that they deal with any vehicle that is parked in contravention of the regulations. Now, that doesn't mean that vehicles can't stop, because the restriction is only a waiting restriction, which means they are permitted to stop for the purposes of setting down and picking up passengers. What they're not permitted to do is sit there and wait for any substantial period of time. And where that occurs, I would be expecting them to move on the vehicle. My own experience of working within the parking area for 20 odd years or more actually, is that generally speaking, when you have a visible uniformed presence on site, the problem substantially improves, if at all, is my own personal experience. And I can say that coming from a background where I was once one of those people in a uniform standing in front of a school site. So I understand the frustrations and the challenges that it presents both to local residents and to us as enforcement people. Suffice to say, we do the best we can do with the resources we have available in the circumstances. If I had a golden wand to make this problem better, I would be doing it, because it would cause me a lot less in the way of headaches going forward, and that you can be assured. So I'm not sure if I've answered all the points you've made as best I can, but that's where I am.
Yep, I'll let you go back once. Thank you.
You say that you can, I mean, I know the cameras are only enforceable for the yellow zigzags because you had one there not last year, the year before, I think it was. And I think I spoke to you then because it just suddenly appeared. No one told us what was going on. Is it not is there not possibility to have a change of rules that your vehicles can drive down the road, take photographs, and just, because the only way you're going to stop these people is fine them?
Essentially, we follow the legislation. We can't change the rules locally, so we have national legislation underpinned by regulations introduced by the Secretary of State, and then we have local traffic regulation orders which are introduced by the council, which makes the restrictions that are implemented lawful and therefore enforceable. We can't amend them locally, it's done at a national level. What I would add is that amendments were made at a national level some years back, which actually removed some of the scope by local authorities to undertake enforcement by way of camera. So it actually reduced our ability to do it, not improved it.
Thank you. I'm just going to hand over to Councillor Franks as he had a question.
Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I'll keep it as brief as I can. Can I start with your paragraph 17? Highway colleagues have advised there were no collisions in the last 10 years. The fact is that the highways team gets their road traffic collision information from the police. And the police do not record collisions where there is no personal injury. So there may have been dozens or even hundreds over the 10 years of relatively minor damage. But the point about that is that when you are getting minor damage, it's only minor because there didn't happen to be a child in the way at the time. It might have been much, much more serious if there had been. It's worth noting the congestion in Bushmead Road is so serious at school start and finish times that Arriva have formally suspended all the bus services. You don't get buses during school start and finish times. They're not even timetabled. They're permanently removed. Now, we're all aware that, yes, the government changed the rules. The council used to be able to enforce yellow lines by camera. I can't remember how many years, some years ago now, but the government changed the rules so that the council can no longer do that. I personally spoke to the driver of your enforcement car with the camera on the top and asked him why he didn't get out of his car to issue tickets to people who were parked up and down the road on the yellow lines. And he said, we can't do that. To which I responded, it's not a matter of can't, it's a matter of won't. But the driver of that vehicle needs to be encouraged because he can personally issue penalty notices, provided he's doing it personally at the time. He can't use the camera, but he can do it personally. So they should be encouraged to get out and do that. Because clearly no one's going to park on the zigzags while the camera car's sitting there, are they? Or at least it's unlikely. There are some things I think the council could do, to be honest. First of all, the situation has improved thanks to the much more frequent visits by the parking attendants. There's no question that that has improved the situation. It has deterred some of the worst behaviour. I would suggest that one of the roles that this committee can do is to pass a resolution encouraging the enforcement team to continue their more frequent visits, because that would certainly, if nothing else, it prevents the situation getting any worse. You could also encourage the driver of the camera car to get out and personally issue tickets when people are parking on yellow lines, which they could do. It's not impossible for them to do that. And the other thing you could do is you could encourage the police to take a serious interest in some of the appalling driving practices that are witnessed every single day in Bushmead Road. I've personally sent in to Vicky Hawkes photographs of cars driving along the pavement. I don't mean parking on the pavement or crossing the pavement. I'm driving along the pavement. At a time when you've got small primary school children either going in or coming out of school, that has got to be the most dangerous thing that you could possibly do. One of the residents has sent photographs today of a car reversing, doing a three-point turn, when children had to be dragged out of the way to avoid being run over. So the fact that there have been no injury collisions is down to luck and nothing else. So those things I think you could do. You could continue the enhanced service of the parking attendants. You could encourage the camera car driver to actually get out of their car and personally issue tickets, which the one time I asked them to do that, they refused to do. And you can encourage the police to take a much more serious interest in the appallingly dangerous driving practices that occur every single day in Bushmead Road. They might want to walk round the corner and do it outside Sixth Form College as well, because it's just as bad there.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Just a couple of things in response to that, if I may, Chair, and I probably would leave a couple of comments if my colleague from Highways wants to answer, because, again, not all the comments relate to me. In terms of the driver getting out of the camera car, I understand the point you make, but generally speaking, we deploy that camera car these days with one individual inside it. Now, if he gets out of the camera car to walk along the street, that means that the camera car isn't being used for the purpose that we've got it there for. Because in order to operate it, he has to be using the controls within the car. If he gets out of the car and walks along the street to move vehicles on, which I understand he could do that, it means we don't have anyone operating the camera car. It defeats the purpose of having it there in the first place. Secondly, in relation to Bushmead Road, when we became aware of the petition and the issue regarding the closure before the end of last year, I pretty much believe, unless I'm wrong, but I'm pretty much positive that every enforcement visit we've done since then, and I believe since they've come back after Christmas, has actually been a foot patrol enforcement regime. We haven't used the camera car. And the reason I've not used the camera car is to have that visible enforcement presence patrolling up and down Bushmead Road, to have it be more effective. Remember what I say about the camera only being able to be used on the zigzags. I understand the challenge about having increased longer term presence at Bushmead School, but I have to say it's always going to be a challenge dealing with schools. And if I'm tied to a particular regime at one school, with the greatest of respect to everyone, it's at the expense of somewhere else that equally has demands on our service and for our enforcement requirements. So again, I come back to the scenario where I say we do the best in the circumstances we can with the available resources we have. And the comment in relation to the police, I can confirm that I have again today emailed the police, raised the issue again, and I've asked if they can support further work in and around Bushmead Road, but indeed Bushmead Road isn't alone in this issue of schools. We have other school sites in Luton where that could be the same. We do work with the police positively where we can, and once I get some feedback from them where we can take it forward, we would take it forward and will take it forward. So I hope that answers the points I can comment on.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Franks? Anything? Yeah. Okay. I think. Oh, sorry, Councillor Zoe, second one.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to reiterate your issue about the fact that you've got, was it 7 nurseries, 12 primaries, and there's probably a problem at each of them. I can give you 2 in my ward. We have suggested time and time again that what this needs is a properly coordinated effort between yourselves and the police, and almost on a rota basis. I mean, I can cite you Summery School, where they park on the roundabout. Parking enforcement officers can't do much about that, but police can. It needs a properly coordinated, ongoing, full-time operation across all the schools in the borough, because they've all got parking problems, and they've all got parking problems at the same time. So you cannot deploy people every day at each school, because it's just not physically viable. Even if you were to raise tickets like they were going out of fashion, it wouldn't supply the amount of staff you'd need for 2 periods a day, term time. But it does need a properly coordinated operation between parking enforcement and the police, because when you've got people driving on the pavements and doing what amounts to dangerous driving, it isn't something that parking enforcement officers can do anything about, but the police can. So that's what we need to see, is a borough-wide coordination between yourselves and the police, because that's the only way, not just the people at Bushmead, because I know you understand that it's not just your school, but there is a limited resources, but a properly coordinated operation between parking enforcement and the police for all the schools would be a big way forward in this problem.
Have to go in order, so I'll let Tony respond to that and then allow you to have your final comments.
Sorry, just to come back, in terms of coordination, again, I take the point. Again, I would add that we do work with the police where we can. The question of how much time we can spend doing that is a matter for debate. But what I would add is that my service area that deals with parking spends a significant proportion of its daily operational time arranging enforcement visits to be undertaken by officers at the school, all the schools where we've got problems across Luton. So we're talking all day, 5 days a week, every day that there's a school day. I have at least one supervisor that spends a significant proportion of their time taking phone calls from all interested parties, whether it be residents, local elected members, or other drivers, motorists and schools, to ask us for enforcement support. And we do that all day. So our approach is coordinated, but we have to prioritise the schools that have got the greatest need, and we do that, but we've got a number of them with a need. And that means that some are inspected and visited more than others. So I hope that comes back to a little bit to your point, but I acknowledge the point you make about coordination. But we do work with colleagues in the police where we can, including at schools.
Thank you. Allow one final comment from the lead petitioner.
Thank you. Taking about the coordination, one area that's not been discussed here, you've talked about liaising with the police and with your own officers. How about something with the schools so they can, I know they send letters out to the parents, but something with the schools. For coordination purposes, from 20 years at Bushmead, mornings generally are not the problem because parents turn up over a period of time. It's the afternoon is the problem because they all finish at the same time. That is the main issue. Now, I suggested in my conversation with the head teacher that could you not split the school? You've got lower school, upper school. Could you not have just 10 or 15-minute difference in start and finish times between them? No, too much trouble. Well, it'll be a challenge, I accept that. Could we not make Bushmead Road a one-way street during school times like you do with the school down by the BP garage so that people can't do three-point turns because they can just go round? Because my fear is eventually we're all going to be sat here at some time in the future and a child is going to be injured or dead. Then you can have questions to answer that you won't be able to get away with. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Franks, one final comment and then we're going to go into the recommendations.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to drag this thing on, but the reference to making Bushmead Road one way frightens the life out of me. I have experience of residential roads being made one way. And the first thing you notice is the traffic moves much faster. So please, please, please don't ask for Bushmead Road to be made one way. Your problems will get much, much worse, not better.
Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Barnett, Road Safety and Transportation Manager. Just to address a couple of points. Firstly, I was about to comment on what Councillor Franks said. One-way system is something that could be considered. With our new powers under the Traffic Management Act, it may be something that we could potentially do part-time. However, I would have concerns about putting in additional forms of traffic management in the form of traffic calming just to reduce those speeds, because inevitably when vehicles know there's nothing coming to oppose them, they will tend to speed up a little bit, which does increase the risk. In relation to working with the schools, my department, obviously Road Safety and Education, we do work with a lot of the schools in the borough. We try and encourage them. As you pointed out, the heads do send out letters to encourage parents, to try and park more considerately, to try and consider other alternatives, getting their kids to and from school, walking, cycling, using public transport, that sort of thing. We have other schemes as well surrounding sort of junior road safety officers. We try and work with the schools as best we can. I've spoken with my road safety manager this afternoon. Unfortunately, she's not come back to me yet with responses to how much interaction we've had with the school, but it's something that I'm pushing for my team to go back into the school and see if we can get a commitment from them to try and improve, from their side as well, because we acknowledge it needs to be attacked from all areas. Yes, there's the council role to play with regards to enforcement restrictions and implementation. The police certainly have a role to play with regards to the way that people are conducting themselves and the behaviour they're using in these times. And the school could also assist in these matters. But, encouraging their kids to put the pressure on the parents. Parents do listen to their kids. They get dragged into school, to the school assemblies to demonstrate these sorts of things. So I think a joint-up approach is required, and we do try to achieve that as best we can, as Tony's pointed out.
Thank you. Councillor Steer.
Thank you. I've got a bit more of a general point actually on the CCTV enforcement car. It was June 2014 when Secretary of State Eric Pickles banned the use of the CCTV mobile cars, calling them spy cars. But irrespective of the car hasn't really got any powers, is it deployed twice a day across schools? Because surely the car in itself is a deterrent, even though the parents don't know the evidence. And it wouldn't even have to film anything, because whatever it films is useless apart from outside the zigzags, as you pointed out. But surely just the car in itself is a deterrent to parents.
Yeah, it is usually deployed most days. We even have it deployed if it goes to a particular site which is not, it would appear to the officer is not being, there's not an awful lot of illegal parking going on. they will move from one site to another so that they go somewhere where it's most effective. But wherever it goes, it can only monitor that zigzag marking and nothing else. It has no ability to, no yellow lines, no pavement parking. Even if it was to record those vehicles doing that, we couldn't do anything with that evidence because we haven't got the powers to do it. We're very limited as to what offences we can monitor and issue penalty charge notice from via camera. But yes, it is regularly used. But we deliberately, with Bushmead, made the decision to do most of what we've done on foot to keep that visibility because of the increased issues around the closure of that other access point.
Sorry, I think you've misunderstood my question. Okay, that's all right. Perhaps it's the way I've phrased it. As we know, since June 2014, the car has not got any powers apart from the zigzags, as you point out. But my point is, and my question is, surely the car just parked up outside a school, the parents are none the wiser it's got no powers, or most of them. Isn't it in itself, just been parked outside a school, a deterrent, or is it not?
I think it's as much as a deterrent as any camera would be. I mean, when it's parked, the camera hoists up to a certain height. It's, in my view, fairly obvious in what it's there for. It says parking enforcement on it. The camera's at a significant height and visible, so one would hope it would act as a deterrent, and perhaps it does for some. But I think, generally speaking, it doesn't take very long for most people to get to grips with what camera enforcement from a local authority can and can't do, and people will soon pick up on the fact that, it can only operate in certain circumstances. They become aware of it, I believe. There's plenty of information that is in the public domain about it. So hopefully that time I've answered your question.
Yeah, you did, and I accept, perhaps parents are wiser than I, giving them credit for that they do know the car's got no powers. But I guess if it is being deployed twice a day, then it's better than having it sat at the depot. Thanks.
I'm going to allow you one final comment, and then we're going to move
I appreciate that. Just a piece of information for everyone sat around here. I have lost count of the number of times that I have asked people to move, and apart from being sworn at, I have people laugh at me and just say, no one does anything, they don't ticket anybody, we're just going to carry on and tough. And that is the attitude. So if you go to Bushmead Road between the hours of 3:15 and forward, the parents have parked all their cars, they've left their vehicles, they've gone to fetch their children. If they come back and they find there's tickets on their windscreen, perhaps they might think again. But at the moment, there's no enforcement, it never gets done. Call the police if you want to, we don't care. And that is the attitude, is what happens. Because they're not getting ticketed, they're just going to carry on when there's nobody there. Your enforcement officers do a great job. When they're there, they're visible, they don't do it. But when they're not there, they just park because they know that no one's going to nick them.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that, or shall we? Okay, thanks. So lots of good points made here today. The recommendations that are set out are that members note the information detailed in the report relating to the reasons of the closure in the first instance and plan for the repair. And secondly, the actions undertaken by the parking enforcement team in relation to enforcement activities taken at Bushmead School. Perhaps we could add something in there about continuing to enforce as resources allow and communicating with the police on the best way forward. Any seconders for that? Is that agreed? Yeah, all members agreed? So just to clarify, that was just an additional recommendation to whatever I said, basically, to continue enforcement as resources allow and speak with the police to communicate a way forward. And it's not in our remit, but discussions with the school going further, maybe discussing with governors and things like that would be really useful. Not a recommendation, because it's not in our remit, but I think that's a really good idea. Is that okay? Thank Thank you. So that's the final item on the agenda. So thank you all for coming.